Hello everybody, Annie C here with just a few words on the future of that show we all know and love. That is, Thomas and Friends. I'm here to talk about something that is by no means a new problem for the show, but one that has recently come to the forefront again. In other words, I'm here to talk about the future of Thomas. Or rather the past, as you will soon see. Now, don't click away just yet. This is not quite a Journey Beyond Soda review, although I do have to mention it, given that it's a prime example of the changes that have recently come to the show. So let's get right into it. As you all know, Thomas has gone through many changes throughout its more than 30-year runtime. Now, as seen in JBS, the show is yet again undergoing new changes, and these have been met with mixed results, to say the least. From here on out, it looks like we're going to be seeing more of this expressive movement, and other such changes I can only imagine. Some fans are taking an optimistic outlook, and if you are one of these fans, then good for you for staying positive. But all the same, we should all be at least a little worried about the future of this show. With Mattel now seemingly in complete control, from a corporate view, these changes probably seem like a smart decision. They want to make sure Thomas is kept at the top of the ratings, and, as such, they make more money. With all those bright, flashy children's cartoons out there, they want to make sure Thomas, with its mostly staid locomotives and more realistic viewpoint, is able to compete. As such, they now make the engines able to move more freely and more often, bouncing, if you will, and as such, less realistic, but probably more appealing to that young kid watching at home from their point of view. I'm not saying that everything we've come to expect in the Brenner era has completely changed. The special was still written fairly well, has the comedy we've come to expect from this writing team, and is pretty well animated. But from here on out, if they continue in this new vein that they've tapped, I fear that they're going to lose the essence of what Thomas is. Let me elaborate. To explain my point, I'd like to quote a user on Twitter who goes by the handle of @SirTophamNWR, as I believe he put it very well. The biggest problem is I don't see consequences apart from in an accident. I don't see any of this mattering. I don't see the impact or importance of any of this story, and as a result, I don't care. There is very, very little character-driven substance or emotional connection. There's nothing that feels like it matters. It feels simply like an extended episode of a cartoon. Yes, it's a high-budget cartoon. Yes, it's an entertaining cartoon. And so help me, yes, it's a very, very good example of a cartoon. But it's a cartoon. Nothing has consequences, nothing has substance, and everything feels like ink from a pen. Close quote. Now, I don't know about the rest of you, but I'm pretty sure this is not what Thomas is meant to be. I'm not going to comment on what is coming in future, for at the time of this video, nothing is certain. None of us, I'm sure, can definitely know what new changes will stick with the show and what else the company is cooking up besides. All I know is that Thomas has had a formula that has worked for over 70 years, and that there is, in my own opinion, no reason to change it now. Thomas has always been a show about railway locomotives. From the start, the Reverend Audrey intended them to be stories about real railway occurrences, while still making it appealing to children. That's why he gave them faces, and thus made them able to talk to each other. But other than that, he made the stories as realistic as possible. He used these talking engines as a means to teach children about railway terminology and other facets of railway life. And, as he was a reverend, to insert good morals for kids without making it preachy. Now, I know what you're thinking. When the show was in what some might call the golden era, it would take liberties with the realism. On occasion. Season 5, as you probably all know, is the best example of this. They would insert some rather far-fetched scenes, still within reason, but entertaining and exciting nonetheless, which is fine in my opinion, and that still stands for today. But the difference is, throughout it all, they never lost what made Thomas so great. It always felt like a real railway. There were always consequences for actions, and it always felt like it mattered. Anyone could enjoy it because it wasn't dumbed down. I remember as a little kid, I didn't always understand all the railway terminology, or all of it in general, but that didn't stop me from enjoying it. There was just so much to like. It was a solid, sweet little show with no need for extravagant new characters or locations. They introduced the characters slowly, so it was exciting to see new entrants show up on occasion. Now there are so many, it's honestly quite hard to keep track of them. But maybe kids have changed, I don't know. Also, the engines were engines, not humans, and were treated as such. Now don't get me wrong, the engines were not lifeless, not by a long shot. The engines acted silly, had their faults, but they pretty much always learned from their mistakes. There's a difference between a character trait and prolonged idiocy, if I want to put it bluntly. In the CGI, it seems like Thomas never learns. He makes the same mistakes over and over. In fact, in each special, he's seeming to have the same crisis of confidence, which he never had in the old days. I know this is a minor thing, but it matters. He just keeps making the same mistakes over and over, and then in the next special he makes those same mistakes again, and again, and again. But that's a whole nother can of worms. Most of all, what made the show so great was that they treated the audience with respect. In those days, Thomas was still marketed towards kids, yes, but it was intended for anyone to be able to watch it. In this world of shows divided up for different age groups, such as strictly adult shows, strictly teen shows, and strictly children's programming, that was such a beautiful thing. It's part of what made Thomas so charming, sweet, and timeless. It's a classic, and you can't touch that. What I'm trying to say is, Thomas has always done best when it is stuck to the simple format that has made it such a timeless classic. Before JBS, it looked like they were going back to that. Seasons 17 to 20 were a great time for Thomas, and are a prime example of Thomas being transitioned successfully into the modern world of CGI, while still maintaining its roots. The stories weren't extravagant, had morals, and were still fun to watch. This is what Thomas is meant to be. Original stories, simple, fun, but with substance, and a facet of realism. This is what made Thomas so great and beloved by so many generations. Thomas has always meant a lot in my family, and it still does, 2 generations strong. That's part of the reason why I feel so strongly about this, I guess. Audrey's legacy has made many kids happy over the years, just by the simple way that has worked for almost a century. Why should it have to change now? In future, I can only hope that they'll continue the fantastic work they've done in preserving Thomas's legacy for new generations. In closing, all I can say is this. To those who are running the show, if you're out there listening, somehow, Thomas doesn't need to go to exotic places all the time to meet strange new engines, or be kicked into a lava bucket, or whatever. He's perfectly fine right at home, doing all the things an ordinary engine does and just trying to be really useful. That's Thomas, and that's the Thomas that everybody loves and knows. You don't need to change it because it's worked for literal ages. This new fanciful stuff you're doing, it's fine for now, but will it last? Will it last for years like the older seasons have? If you're concerned about this, ditch what the other mainstream cartoons are doing and go with what's worked in the past. Now, I don't know much. I'm just a kid after all. But I'm pretty certain that Thomas doesn't have to change this drastically. And older and wiser heads than I have said the same thing. I trust the writers. You guys are great. But to the big guys truly in charge, let the writers do their thing and continue to make this something that will last for generations. Something to be proud of. You guys have the potential. You just need to keep on harnessing it. Thank you. By the way, each time that Thomas has headed down a dark track, so to speak, it's always returned to what it's supposed to be. So, if Thomas is truly on the way down again, what's to say it won't return again? The strongest trees have the deepest roots, after all. The future of this show is no longer certain. It never was. But there will always be a legacy to look back on, and nothing will ever take that away. We may not know where Thomas is going, but we know where he's been. And that's the most important thing, after all. All the same, despite all I've said, here's to a bright future for this beloved tank engine, no matter how dark the outlook may seem. Well, that's about it for my rather rambling view on this whole matter. Thanks for listening, guys.